This August 28th, excuse me, this September 28th meeting of the Mount Airy Planning Commission will come to order. Everybody stand for pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Planning Commission members, I assume that you've had a chance to review the minutes of our August 28th meeting. I would entertain a motion to either accept as is, or if you see changes or things that need to be updated, to mention those as well.
I'll motion to approve.
All right, motion has been made to approve the minutes of August 28th. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion has been made.
Wait.
All right,
Sorry. I have a motion to make an adjustment to the meeting.
okay, go ahead. We'll deal with that first.
Under new business, Heather Wallace voted yay. She did not vote when we are going into a closed session with the attorney. And it says yay.
Okay,
Number 6.
yeah. All right, so she didn't vote yay. She voted nay?
She did not vote.
She did not vote?
Yes. Everybody was here.
Oh, that's true, that's true. That's true, as the alternate, she did not vote. All right, is everyone in agreement with that correction?
Yes.
See a lot of nodding heads. Okay, we'll make that change. Any others? Thanks for bringing that up. All right, and we'll go back to, I'll entertain a motion to approve then with that amendment.
I will motion to approve the minutes with the correction.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, we got it. Very good. Okay. All right, and now we have the opportunity for citizen comments for anything that's not on the agenda this evening. Anybody have anything? Okay, it's going to be a good, productive meeting. I can feel it.
Oh, no.
All right, county planners, your shot. We have the Carroll County planner here. Okay, come ahead. How are you tonight, Hannah? Super.
Make sure your mic is green.
Now that we're in fall, I think everyone's doing much better.
I'm going to apologize for my voice. I was at the Ravens game yesterday.
Oh, that was so sad.
So just 2 quick updates. The main one being the county transportation master plan is being brought back to our planning commission at our October 17th meeting. They already reviewed many of the chapters. This is their final review of the transportation master plan. We are hoping to get that wrapped up on November 1st. And I know you guys are going through your master plan right now, and the plan is to incorporate your changes after you guys reach final adoption, because there's like 4 other municipalities that are ongoing with their master plan as well. So to try to keep up with all of those changes, we want to make sure we get it right after it's adopted. So once your final master plan is adopted, any changes that need to be updated in the transportation master plan will be incorporated at that time.
Okay, so there are 4 other communities besides Mount Airy.
Yeah,
that are
it's
currently working on theirs. What are they?
Mount Airy, Hampstead, New Windsor, and Union Bridge.
Okay, 3 others.
Yeah.
4 in all.
4 in total,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's good to know in case we want to reach out to them and.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just my last update is, since we submitted the triennial update to the water and sewer master plan, we will not be doing a fall amendment to the plan because it hasn't been approved yet. And we're just waiting on MDE to approve that, and we should expect that in a couple months.
Okay. Any questions for Hannah? Any feedback?
Just real, Chairman?
Yes.
Just again, thanks for helping us with the data.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
For me, Hannah, on the open space survey.
Mm-hmm.
It was really valued. Thank you so much.
Of course, that's what I'm here for.
Super.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you. Justin, your turn.
Good evening, Planning Commission. The first item that I have is, I had the plan for Hampton's East Creek side. At the last meeting, I wasn't here for it, but I did provide information on it. It was given preliminary approval for 214 single-family lots and 221 townhomes on 182 acres, and the site plan for the townhomes was also approved. This is all off the Ligonor area.
Okay,
In this upcoming month of October, Cromwell is another plan that's up for preliminary subdivision. It's seeking approval for 488 age-restricted residential units. 192 of them are single-family detached. 184 of them are single-family or townhomes, and 112 multi-units. This site is located on the north side of Lake Ligonor Boulevard, and it is north of Oakdale High School. Two other items that I have is the South Frederick Corridors Plan a workshop was held on September 20th, and a potential decision will be made during the October meeting. Sugarloaf also, a potential decision will be at the October meeting. And the last item that I had, the Mixed Use Committee report, the committee of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has noted the difference between the expected and the actual outcomes resulting from the application of the county's mixed-use zoning regulations. This committee will formulate recommendations for achieving the kind of integrated mixed-use development envisioned by the Livable Frederick Master Plan, and attaches the document of what they're expecting to talk about and what they're looking for. The item wasn't really talked about during the meeting. It's supposed to be, there'll be a more in-depth discussion in the month of October or down the road, but it was just, they're just putting out that they aren't necessarily happy with the mixed-use zone regulations.
okay,
That's all I
all
have.
right. Any questions or feedback for Justin?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Regarding that last topic, so if I can put it in a slightly different phrase, so the current code for the county regarding mixed use is seen as being in need of change
Correct.
based upon some mixed-use developments that have, I'm adding those words, but is that kind of the rationale, Justin?
Yep, they're not seeing the type of development that they hoped for
The
in
outcome?
terms of the actual mixing of uses.
I see.
So a lot of it's sort of segregated pods of development, which
Gotcha, thank you.
we're looking to fix.
All right. Justin, I have a question. Is it possible, we're especially interested here in Mount Airy with the development that happens over time in the southeast, I'll call it the quadrant, the southeast quadrant of Frederick County, because that is somewhat adjacent to Mount Airy. So the growth rate there, has an effect upon us because of the proximity. Is it possible, do you have available to you the information that you could go back and summarize over the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years, what the rate of growth in that particular southeast quadrant has been?
We can provide you with information on that. One of the items that I am working on, and it's been a work in progress with getting data from the city of Frederick, but we are trying to track of all the current developments and where they're at in terms of growth. Part of the problem with the county is a lot of developer rights agreement were assigned for most of the Ligonor area, so we don't really have a lot of control over that. It's kind of what was agreed upon. But I can provide a summary next time of.
Yeah, bottom line, the rate of growth in that area because of its proximity to Mount Airy is a great interest to us. Okay, all right, super.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
part of the packet that you handed us was the MXD changes and the example and recommendations. Could you, or do you know anything about the Idaho example that they found to be inspiring?
I was not in attendance of the, our design expert was in meeting with the subcommittee of the Planning Commission. So I don't really know a whole bunch about that yet, and they haven't really presented any sort of information on it, but whether it's this month or the next month, Planning Commission, I can definitely provide more insight of what was presented. And I know they did want to look into and mention the other 10 communities that they looked at. I don't know why necessarily they chose that one in Idaho, but as soon as I get more information, I can.
I'm curious if they did like a national study and were looking at mixed-use developments and what they found to be inspiring for the county,
Yeah,
worth seeing what they found.
exactly.
That would be nice to know.
Yeah, any additional information you might be able to forward to us on that would be appreciated. Okay, anything else for Justin? All right, thank you, sir. That brings us down to section 5 of our agenda tonight.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Yes,
I would like to make a motion that we move ordinance 2023-32 to the bottom of the agenda tonight so that we can move forward with getting our cannabis
okay.
ordinances looked at.
So deal with the cannabis ordinances first.
Yes, please.
All right, is there a second to that recommendation?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion has,
Double second.
here. Motion has been made and seconded to move ordinance 2023-32 discussion to the bottom of this section and to deal with the others first, 35, 39, and alternate 39. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, and it passes. Very good. All right, then we'll deal first with 2023-35.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay,
Based upon 3 versions of very similar ordinances, I would like to make a motion to the Town Council from the Planning Commission to withdraw 2023-35 from consideration by the Planning Commission and to emerge appropriate portions of that 2023-32 into 2023-39 as a side appropriate portion.
35.
35, correct.
I'm sorry.
Or it's 35 into 30.
35 into 39, correct. And appropriate portions would be defined as in coordination between the authors of 35 and 39, along with the town attorney, determine what text in 35 go forward into 39 to strengthen it. I know that's a very long motion, but basically, let me reiterate, recommendation to the town council to withdraw 2023-35 from consideration by the Planning Commission and merge appropriate portions into -39.
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to blend portions of 2023-35 with 2023-39. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and it passes. All right. All right, in terms of moving forward with that discussion, do you have suggestions for that merging? What portions of each?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion on 2023-39, and it also addresses the previous comments and also 2023-39 alternate. The motion is that the Planning Commission provides a conditional recommendation of approval on 2023-39 with the conditions being we add those changes seen in -39 alternate, add appropriate text from -35, we add appropriate text to address any existing tobacco and vape businesses. And finally, we add the appropriate text in the non-permitted uses within MXUCC. And I don't know if that's too much, John, for you to record. Did you get all that? Or-
Yes, we got all that.
Okay.
Who would do that creation? Would we do that? Would we ask council to work on that, or?
No, that's a great question. And I believe when we deliberate on these proposed ordinances, our language doesn't have to be specific to changes, but they can be broad strokes on suggested areas of change, if I'm correct, Tom.
That is correct. So first of all, dash 39 alt already contains and merges the language from dash 35
Okay.
to it. Number two, when this goes back to the town council, this will have to be reintroduced and then set for a public hearing, probably 30 days or so after the next meeting. Of course, in all of that, the changes can be made most likely by the sponsors, Councilman Demoter and Councilman Munder. So.
And that's when the specific language will actually appear when it's reintroduced at council.
Or ultimately when enacted. There may be comments during the public that may inspire changes, for instance.
Correct.
What would be the timing of that hearing?
That's up to the council president, but my guess would be November, December.
Yeah, somewhere around there as well. Yeah, I think right now, tentatively, there's a placeholder on the council draft agenda for October for this ordinance. Should you provide a favorable recommendation or some sort of recommendation?
Okay. Okay.
Anybody have anything to add? Have we covered everything?
Make an amendment to his amendment, or make an amendment to his motion, then?
Sure.
I'd like to add 2 items to his motion. The first is under section 112-11 signs.
112 dash,
Yeah.
dash
112-11 signs.
okay.
That's replace N, signs not expressly permitted, and bump that down and replace it with the following. Any sign with advertisement, images, or language related to cannabis, hemp products, delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol, kratom, tobacco, tobacco paraphernalia, smoking, or vaping as the new N.
Repeat that one more time, please.
Sign with advertisement, images, or language related to cannabis, hemp products, delta-8 tetrahydrocannabinol, kratom, tobacco, tobacco paraphernalia, smoking, or vaping.
Okay.
And the second part to change, if you go to, let's see, letter F, under 11262 special exceptions. It has open no earlier than 8 a.m. nor close later than 10 p.m. I would amend that to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
All right, do we need to take these one at a time, Tom?
There's pending motions, so the original movant, first of all, can advise whether he accepts both one or none of the amendments, and if he does, then there would have to be a second of the motion as amended.
All right. Would you restate your motion then?
Sure.
Well, I mean, let's take it.
Advise if he accepts the amendments, and then
Well, okay.
Are there any other amendments prior to accepting that? Couldn't you accept them all at once?
Yes.
Or, so I would ask if there's anybody else has any additional amendments.
Anybody?
No.
All right.
So the original motion was for the Planning Commission to provide a conditional recommendation of approval of 2023-39, conditions being add the changes seen in -39 alternate, which I understand include -35.
Correct.
Add appropriate text to address existing tobacco and vape businesses because the proposed amendment constrains them to community commercial. And I don't know if the rest of the code has addresses. I think there's one area that has tobacco and vape sales in the downtown zone and industrial districts. So that has to be corrected. And then add appropriate text in the non-permitted uses within our current MXUCC, because when we talk about constraining it to the community commercial, we have to consider MXUCC at the same time because of its commercial element. And adding Commissioner O'Malley's changes to the proposed hours of operation and to the 112-11 signage code with respect to cannabis-related business signage. Is that too broad?
Not specific to cannabis-related business. Any sign or advertisement in the town that contains images, language, or advertisement towards cannabis, hemp, delta 8, kratom, tobacco, smoking, or vaping.
That's a hefty set of conditions. All of that results in a favorable approval with those conditions. That's the motion.
Okay. That motion has been made. Is everyone clear on it? Is there a second?
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded to move forward with Ralph's very, very long and involved motion. All those in favor, let me be known by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Like sign? All right, and it passes. Very good.
May I address the commission?
Yes? If you're succinct.
I will try to be. So first, I appreciate the attention given to this ordinance and your favorable recommendation. But I wanted to see if I could take, again, concise, but a few minutes to give you my rationale for
5 minutes.
okay, for the buffering components of this ordinance. And I think it's important for you as the Planning Commission to be aware of what the buffering conditions have resulted in terms of what the town will look like. So for you as the Planning Commission, I think it's important you see this, and you may want to think it through a bit. You may want to just offer some comments, okay? Because I think it's important that we have a good ordinance in place, we have good policy, and I'm comfortable with the ordinance as the sponsor, but you as the Planning Commission are very comfortable. So let me quickly say, so when I worked on this ordinance and when my approach to setting the buffering zones for this ordinance, I did so intuitively. I just thought to myself, based on the characteristics of the town, and I actually walked to the town. I walked my neighborhood, I walked other neighborhoods to get a sense of what I thought. I started as a frame of reference with the state of Maryland law that starts off with a 500-foot buffer surrounding schools, parks, other public-type venues. And then I worked from there. And so my rationale, so you understand, in this ordinance, it proposes a 1,000-foot buffer from schools, parks, churches, basically any place where young people would gather routinely and have activities, okay? So that is double what the state default baseline is. Now, per the MML Cannabis Symposium, we are allowed to modify those numbers. We are allowed to make them larger, as I did, as long as we have a good rationale. And the planner at the symposium spoke to this and said, take into account the unique characteristics of your town, the lay of the land, the way your property is already zoned. And if you do your analysis and however it comes out, then that's your answer. You don't have to contort yourself to fit these types of businesses into your town if they don't fit. So my rationale for going from 500 to 1,000 feet for the public-related areas was I didn't think 500 feet was enough based on how things are positioned in our town, because a lot of schools kind of abut some of these other public spaces. And also, if you look at the federal law, marijuana is still illegal. And there is the drug-free school zones. It's the Comprehensive Drug Reform Act of 1987 that basically sets, remember the drug-free school zones and the signs? They used 1,000 feet for that, for good reason. And technically, it still is federally illegal marijuana. Now, that may change in the future, but right now, it is illegal. And so I gravitated to the 1,000-foot buffer zone for those reasons. The other thing I did was the Maryland law is silent on buffers for residential zones. Doesn't speak to it at all. So in my intuitive thinking through the process and walking around, I thought there should be some sort of a buffer between these types of businesses and residences. Because if you look at the way our town is zoned, we have several areas where we have residential areas that abut commercial areas. One of those examples is near where I live. There's the Village Oaks Road, Village Oaks townhouses, and those abut to the Mount Airy Village Center, the Food Line Shopping Center with the Ace Hardware and such. Those are right next door to each other with no buffer. You can literally walk a path from the townhouses to that shopping center. So my rationale is, if the logic was to put a 500-foot buffer around school zones, because we don't want children to be exposed to, influenced by, or perhaps even purchase these products while they're at school, shouldn't they have the same protections in their own homes where they live and play? You should have a buffer zone for that as well. So that was my logic there. So those are two important baselines for my logic in coming up with those buffer zones, which are in the ordinance, okay? So with that said, my process was, as I said, I looked at this intuitively. I came up with what I thought these buffer zones should be. Then I compared what I came up with to other municipalities locally where they had them and nationally, states and municipalities across the country. And I found a lot of alignment with the 1,000-foot buffer zone for school zones. And I could rattle off a whole list of states and towns, and I can give you that if you want. But my point is, there is good logic and precedent for using a 1,000-foot buffer zone, okay? So with all that said, then I worked with the town, and they had come up with a set of maps, and I worked with the town planner to come up with a final set of maps that totally reflected the buffer zones in the current ordinance. And then I looked at those maps and what those resulting buffer zones present. And what it presents is, and this may be fine, or you may have some different views, but it's a very limited space where cannabis dispensaries may be able to be located, okay? In addition to that base map, we created some alternative maps that had some differing buffering distances. So I think it's important that you're aware, because you need to be aware of what these buffering zones result in for the town, and then you may want to think through this. So this map, and it's, you know, I apologize, it's a little complicated, but I thought due diligence, you should see this. So, John, this is the default ordinance, correct?
This is what's currently in the ordinance. This is the concerned areas of 1,000 feet with a residential buffer of 500, which is the ordinance we just looked at.
Right. And could you just highlight, just hit the bottom line, which is what is the area where these businesses could locate?
So this current ordinance, the only place that it would be relatively, would be this area here, which is part of the actual carnival grounds towards the industrial parcel. So it's a very small portion, as the ordinance is currently written, which is almost not allowed, right? Because it's basically, there's no area for that actually to, a business to put a business in currently with the way it's zoned, this ordinance the way it is. So we can go to map number 2, which shows the 1,000-foot clearance of the actual, the concerned area, the 1,000-foot with a 200-foot, 250-foot radius. And then that allows for a little bit more within the Twin Arts Shopping Center, very small, kind of in the parking lot and near the Jiffy Lube and part of the actual carnival grounds.
So that's 1,000-foot around public facilities, 250-foot residential buffer.
Residential. So again, so still very restrictive. Again, there's hardly any area in the Twin Arts Shopping Center. And again, the only 2 other areas are the carnival grounds out by 27 and back towards the industrial area and the ballpark area. So if we go to the next slide, which would be the 550 with a 100-foot radius, this sort of opens up a little bit more area within the Twin Arts Shopping Center and all of the area that's part of the carnival grounds.
So again, it's not 550, it's 500.
500, yeah.
So this is using the default state law buffer of 500 feet around a school, playground, park, church, et cetera. And it's adding in some residential protection buffer of 100 feet.
Correct. And again, this really, opens up a little bit more of the Twin Arts Shopping Center. And there's a small portion really hard to see right here along 144.
One of the takeaways is even going from these broad buffers to relatively small buffers, even the small buffers is presenting very limited space for these types of businesses, which is what this shows.
And if you go to the next map, which basically just shows, this is where the controlled areas for the concerned areas for the parks and schools and playgrounds and other facilities.
So this is the 500-foot default state
Which is
buffer around schools, public facilities.
And I will mention the map that we used, we didn't have the MXD uploaded yet, so this is, ignore this whole area here because this is all MXD, currently zoned MXD. So again, this still just, if you went with just the state, this would still open up Twin Arts Shopping Center and again, the carnival grounds and a very small portion along 144.
And that's the 500-foot requirement.
That's what the state of Maryland currently is. And again, there are other items on this map that were included as part of the ordinance, which is pediatric and other healthcare facilities. Like this is the Health Unlimited that's currently there, the dance studios. So again, these are other areas that were added as part of the ordinance 39 alternate.
Now, I will comment, the dance studios, the recreation centers, those types of things, those are included in the state default 500-foot buffer definition. And they actually track with, I don't get too involved, but they track with the federal law about certain public type facilities where you need a buffer of 1,000 feet because of the controlled substances law. So I think all of the public related facilities within the public buffer are consistent with the state law and what others are doing, I have added pediatric medical centers, medical offices, because I did find that used by another town. And I would pose the question to the commission, moving forward, do we want a pediatric medical office next to a cannabis or a vape shop? And right now, actually, if you look at the Puff and Stuff smoke shop, right above that is a sign that says Frederick Pediatrics. So if you don't want that in the future, then I think we do need some sort of a buffer around a pediatric medical office. That was my logic. So this all comes back to say, I wanted you to be aware of what this is resulting in.
Implications of it.
And if the buffering distances in this ordinance, because right now, you've approved everything, and I wanted you to be aware of the buffering distances so that if you felt like you wanted to look at those further or tweak those, all we need to do left is to turn those dials to arrive at the buffer zones that you were all comfortable with, because everything else would stay the same.
Yes.
So if this ordinance passes, what happens to a situation like that where you have an existing vape shop close to a pediatric office? So what happens to the vape shop?
Those would all be grandfathered. So this is all prospective. And if you look at the ordinance, I think it's the third whereas on the first page, it says, to regulate and restrict tobacco shops and vape shops in the town established on or after the effective date of this ordinance. So any of those businesses that are there now continue to stay there. They operate just as they have. But let's say Puff and Stuff decides to go out of business or move. If somebody wanted to come in and relocate in that same spot, they would have to go through this ordinance special exception process.
Would the signage get changed?
I'm sorry, the signage?
Would the signage have
Yes.
to come into compliance?
Yes.
Okay.
So everything that's in this is moving forward upon the approval date of the ordinance.
Mr. Chair,
Thanks for
quick
that,
question.
Sure.
And John, thanks for building that. That's kind of, Joe Timpeg simple for me. Our next potential commercial development of any size is associated with an application at Candace in North Main, MXUCC. Would these buffers, and I believe I know the answer, but just pulsing you, would these buffers, because off the top of my head, we have proximity of two churches on either side of North Main, would these buffers encompass any area of that plat that would be potentially commercially developed?
So the current ordinance would snuff that whole area.
Gotcha. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Comment?
I believe, John can correct me if I'm wrong, MXUCC was passed not allowing any type of business that sells vape or cannabis or anything else. So they're all already excluded
Prohibited.
from that zone.
Mr. Chair, I didn't include it because I didn't know if the council member wanted to in his ordinance, but there is always an option where you could put a sunset clause on anything that is open. A lot of other jurisdictions that had open vape shops or dispensaries, they gave them 24 months to come into compliance with whatever they passed. So
And I appreciate that, Commissioner O'Malley, and just a compliment. Most of the additions in 39 alternate were based on recommendations from Commission Member O'Malley. But I did talk through that suggestion with Tom, our town attorney. So I don't know if, Tom, you want to speak to that in terms of the feasibility or unfeasibility of that?
I mean, it depends on what specific part you're asking them to come into compliance with. I don't think, I would be very skeptical that a court would allow us to say, you're currently operating, and in 5 years, you have to apply to get a special exception to continue your use. I think they become non-conforming uses, and they continue to grandfather. The signs issue is a closer issue. I would probably say on balance, it'd be pretty controversial to say that if you've got an approved sign for your business, you're gonna have to comply with new regulations relating to signs. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying there'd be some controversy to it, and, you know, I'm not
Well, and
guaranteeing.
to that point, there are businesses out there that have started putting additional signage in their windows that are not approved.
Right.
So
Yes.
we could at least then go after them to get them in compliance related to those signs. But the business sign or any banner signs that have been approved already, then they couldn't be reversed, as you were asking.
So Tom, if I'm correct, so Puff and Stuff, if they've put in all kinds of stuff in their windows and this goes through, then we can enforce them to take it down, or they would have to apply for new signage?
So to the extent they currently have signs that were not approved, this ordinance does not negate our ability to go in and say they're not approved then, under the old, they're not approved under the new, take them down. Controversy comes in with if they have a sign that was approved because it was compliant with what is current law, this ordinance comes along, I think it'd be a little controversial to say, take your approved signs down that were in compliance with the law when they were posted, and you got to change them out. I would suspect you're probably going to have some controversy there. I don't know how that comes out, and I know that other, you know, towns, municipalities are going to do what they're going to do, so, but.
Okay. All right.
One comment, mixed use CC does not have a prohibition on vape shops and things like that. It came before the council and they didn't,
Oh,
yeah.
yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
So I just wanted, you know, it's important that you're aware as the planning commission. Now, are these defendable buffers? I think they are, as the person who put these together. Are we limiting where these types of businesses can go based on the current buffers? Yes, we are. If you're good with that, if you think it should be a little less restrictive, there are some alternatives here. All of them are, I guess my point is, all of them are pretty restrictive, even the base smaller buffer zones. So these extra broader buffer zones aren't really taking that much more away. But it's just based on the nature of our town. Our town is a small town. Our commercial districts are kind of intermingled or abut residential districts, and it's, you know, what do we want for our town in terms of health and safety, along with fairness for businesses. This is how the analysis came out. So if you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
Well, I think the first question, planning commission members, is your comfort level with imposing limitations.
Bill, can you come closer to the mic so that Deborah can do her minutes?
I think the first step is your feedback, and we can vote on it, or we can have some more discussion. Your comfort level in imposing limited distances that these shops can be in terms of residential area and other areas, schools and so forth.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I believe we already gave a favorable recommendation on what was already established, what
Okay.
the council member wrote. I think if the council has a public hearing and they talk amongst each other, I think if they make any changes, that's up to them, but we gave you the favorable recommendation at what was given to us.
All right.
All right, so Councilman DeMotor, if you would take the feedback and the concurrence from the planning commission back with you
I will, thank you
to
so
the
much.
council.
So we will put this it's on tentatively. I will make sure that this is a formal agenda item.
All right.
And it will be on the October agenda. So thank you all for your efforts.
Thanks for your diligence on it. Okay. Moving on. Are we ready for 2023-32? Okay. Well, I'm simpler than that. How do you wish to proceed? 2023-32. Ralph, you have a,
Yeah, I would, go ahead, you can have either the,
Yeah, I don't know if you had a staff report on this or not.
I don't.
You don't, no need for it, okay. Then to begin with a motion and then discussion after a second, if a second occurs. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion with respect to 2023-32 for a favorable conditional approval to the council with the following changes. That the change be in paragraph 98-23 of the proposed amendment. I, Table 1, to be changed to read MXU-CC is 30%, and MXD, just below it, is 30%. These two changes are from the current 40% level. That's the only conditional motion I make with respect to the proposed amendment.
Can I make an amendment to that? Since we're doing that now. Based on our research, I think everybody had that chart. We looked up a ton of different areas, and they did not have net developable acreage. They had gross, all of them. So I would like to amend Table 1 to say gross developable acreage, and then, sorry, under section, oh gosh, it's all the way in the back. It mentions net developable acreage again under section H, 1. To be consistent, they should all say gross.
Mr. Chair, may I? Yeah, once you're done.
let's,
I think those were the only two spots where I saw it.
Not,
all right, let's have reaction to that suggestion by Martina.
Oh, sorry, under F, it also says net,
hold on. Can,
on F1.
Martina, could you say what page? I got the chart.
Right, and then, sorry, I was looking for it, it's under
Page 6.
section, page, sorry, so the first one is the chart, and then the second one is on page 6 of 8, under F1.
F, or eight, oh, F1.
Yeah, and then H1,
Okay.
It is already crossed out. Oh,
oh, sorry, and then I had, that's all I could find unless anyone else found another one.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
So I think gross makes sense when you're talking about the total open space, but net makes sense when you're talking about the units per acre, because it's net developable, and that's what you're developing, so it's, Carl, you can probably explain it better.
Oh, I was going to say net, the chart on this has currently is written as net. That was not an addition of mine or anything else. You change that you change every zone from net to gross. So I would advise leaving the proposed amendment to the motion on the table 1 by Commissioner Martina to just leave it as net and not put gross there, because it will change the meaning of every zone within this town of developable acreage percent. Net also is more favorable to when you develop open space. You never really want to put it towards gross, because that favors more development, while the chart here is to increase the amount of open space here within town or a development. So gross was taken out mainly for that sole purpose. As I indicated, the chart in it itself, for some reason, has been net and is net currently in code. That was not the intent to change every zone here in town from net to gross. Also, therefore, this is probably taking off more of the individual, I want to say, zones in the code, like the R1 zones and everything else.
Carl, how long has that been the case?
What, for that, for the, ever since I've been reading code, a long time, whenever those zones were established under current code, is my guess.
Tom, you want
Guess.
to weigh in on this?
Since section 98-23 was amended probably around 2007-ish, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that, same thing with the maximum net developable acreage. I would say just leave it as net for the maximum of 7 dwellings per net. It can lower the density of a development when being planned. And, excuse me, the 75, 85 net or gross in F1, same thing net. It might lower the density or the density of the development or the compactness of the development if you leave it in net instead of gross. Because gross, you need to remember, is the total acreage of the property. Mine is not taking anything out, no steep slopes, no nothing, no environmental sensitive area. So you're almost rewarding a developer when you put gross in there. Even though, say if you have, a 250 acre parcel, 20% of that is potentially environmentally sensitive, or it has to be taken out for net, steep slopes or stuff. A developer can come in, use the ratio for that 250 acres instead of 230. So it's kind of almost allowing automatic overdevelopment of a parcel, in my view. That's why I was changed from gross to net in those areas. Yes, ma'am.
So if we just do the math, right?
Okay.
So if on open space, so if you have 250 acres
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
and you go gross, are you doing 10% of, let's just say it's 10% open space. Is it 10% of 250, right, which is 25?
For gross.
Right.
Okay.
If you do net, net's going to be less than 250, right?
Yes.
So then you're at like 230 is net developable, say. So then your open space is only 23. So gross benefits you in the open space calculation.
I cannot deny that in the open space category, but if you're adding, but as I said, the chart was that way for net. I don't know why the chart was originally established under it. Also, for mixed use CC, there is a commercial component for it. So I want to be fair, I guess I could say, to a developer of the thing, where for a mixed use CC or mixed use, it would be potentially used as keep it in line with existing code and put net, recognizing that there is a commercial component. Commercial component's not even currently required to provide any open space whatsoever.
There's another comment.
Boy.
All right, go ahead.
Well, yeah, Ron, I'm not,
Please go to the microphone up there.
I'm not gonna, if it's gonna be long, do you want me to?
Yeah, well, it'll be a couple minutes, is all. I understand. And I appreciate this discussion because it illustrates the points that I'm going to discuss, which is the changes are infusing really confusion into the ordinance. And I apologize, I wasn't here last month. My son at 25 years old invited me on a week to golf with him, and I said, I'm in. I'm not going to deny him that opportunity. Background information and comments on proposed ordinance, on this proposed ordinance. This ordinance is proposed to amend the MXD ordinance and is an example of mixing apples and tomatoes. Although the desire is to provide a coherent MXD ordinance, this proposed ordinance adds confusion to the MXD process. And I note the following. It has been mistakenly suggested adding a percentage to this chart would increase open space within the town. This is incorrect because per paragraph I preceding that chart, it states, except for developments with a residential component located in the downtown zone, the total area of dedicated open space shall equal the amount by which all dwelling units are reduced below the base zoning and shall meet the requirements outlined in that table. Again, it goes to reducing the amount of units allowed within the residential or single residential type zoning. This table is designed to balance the reduction of lot sizes, clustering of lots, while maintaining an area of open space for residential developments. In other words, it's designed to ensure that the clustering of residential lots, reduction of lot sizes does not increase additional number of residential lots. In the case of MXD, this is protected by the requirement of 25% commercial space. Adding MXD and MXUCC to this table is inconsistent with the single-use zoning for residential. The most recently approved Ordinance 23-30 establishes the requirement of 3 acres per 100 persons for MXD, which is now consistent with all other residential and MXUCC zoning categories. This is a higher standard of open space required than trying to amend the above table. In fact, this point was argued by the town attorney in his February 26, 2019 letter regarding the Prospect Place zoning analysis for open space. In that letter, the town attorney stated, Section 9823, on the other hand, generally imposes a percentage of net developable acreage on a scale between 25 and 50%, depending on the density allowed in the zoning district in which the project is located. He also states clearly Section 25-5, which is your 3 acres per 100 persons, imposes a higher standard where the town parks and open space facilities are inadequate. Again, that's the 3 acres per 100. You're trying to do something that's already been done by 2023-30. Much has been said about the 40%, but unlike single-use residential zoning, the residential density in the MXD is constrained by the commercial space requirement of 25%, as well as the required 3 acres per 100 persons for open space. It's been suggested by many people that we are at the beginning of the site development process for Mount Airy Crossing or the Beck property. I would suggest this is being conveyed incorrectly. In fact, I believe we are at the bottom of the 9th inning in a baseball game or in the last 2 minutes of a football game. We have completed the pre-concept sketch plan, many variations, held charrettes, updated the plan based upon community feedback from the charrettes, and now we'll be holding 2 public hearings this week on that current pre-concept sketch plan. These comments from the public hearings will be used by the town council jointly with the Planning Commission in workshops to discuss the design adjustments and finally an approval of a pre-concept sketch plan by the town council. This is the end of the design development, laying out the elements of the plan for approval. From this point forward, it is just additional engineering to meet town and county permitting. We are not starting over of the design process once we have an approval by the town council of the pre-concept sketch plan. With public hearings scheduled for this week on a pre-concept sketch plan that was developed from the charrette process and a recognition that the development will need to provide 3 acres per 100 people or persons. Amending the MXD ordinance injects confusion into the process. The process is working correctly so that the last step of the pre-concept sketch plan is for the town council to review and together with the developer and the planning commission arrive at an acceptable development that all parties can agree to. This is the third time the author has proposed changes to the MXD ordinance, and in the previous 2 times it was soundly rejected. The MXD ordinance as it exists today was developed over a great deal of time with a lot of discussion in the public in this room process, in an open process, and was not by a single individual trying to force his opinion on the Planning Commission. Based on all of this, I urge you to continue with an unfavorable recommendation to the town council of this ordinance and the changes proposed.
All right. Comments, reaction? Let's get this first.
Tom, if you would maybe chime in on some of that.
Sure. So what I was referring to, and it is absolutely correct, remember that the Chapter 25 section is not the open space requirement for the development for all time. It is simply the threshold by which a development qualifies for consideration of a waiver by this body in those times, such as now, when the town is inadequate in its open space. But if there were to ever come a time that the town were adequate in its open space as defined by its ordinance, what would be left to govern the open space would be Section 98-23. So that would be my response.
Okay.
So this should be as written, correct, as what Ralph has proposed?
Yeah, I
Instead
have-
of the amendment?
Yeah, because, well, procedurally, can I just go ahead and withdraw that amendment now that we've,
Well, in as much as the movement did not yet accept the amendments, then I
Okay.
think
yeah,
probably goes away that way.
okay, good.
Do you want to make a comment? Sure. Okay.
Thank you. I just.
5 minutes, please.
Okay.
Green light, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Just take a few minutes. I realized, I looked at my calendar, the first time I came to the Mount Airy Planning Commission was 1 year ago this month. So that's how long we've been dealing with changes to the MXD zone. And as we've said, it's getting really difficult to say the same thing over and over again, but as we've said in the past, these are changes to the ordinance with the purpose of effecting changes to our plan. We should let the plan go through the process instead of changing the ordinance. That's all we're asking. Hopefully you got my letter with the research that we did. We researched 10 different jurisdictions, and I think what's important to realize is there are other parts of the zone that impact the ability to provide open space. Those I listed are the required mix of uses, so we have to do 25% commercial. If we didn't have to do that, providing open space would be a lot different. The allowable density, the height restriction, and most importantly, the definition of open space. So you might look at another jurisdiction that has a higher percentage of open space, but their definition includes a lot of different things. Mount Airy's definition in our research is very narrow. It doesn't really allow that much to count as open space. So when you talk about higher percentages, you have to keep that in mind. The jurisdictions we looked at were Carroll County, Sykesville, Westminster, Frederick County, City of Frederick, Newmarket, Brunswick, Howard County, Gaithersburg, Rockville, all in the 4 surrounding counties. I think it was a good cross-section. So when you take those other requirements into account, and the fact that we have a plan that's in play, we're sort of recommending that if you did 10% as a open space requirement for commercial, you could do 30% for residential, and then 25% overall. So I don't know if you want to complicate it by doing 3 different requirements, but that would make sense given the research we did and given the plan that we have in play. Thank you.
Thank you. Reactions?
So just a couple things. One, I just want to remind everyone here that this is for all developments in the future, right? And the town council could decide that this is prospective if this passes. So I just want to put that context out there that we have to be worried about what's coming up in the future. This is going to be part of the town code, right, permanently. So we just need to make sure it's right. And again, town council has flexibility to make decisions about prospective versus retroactive.
Tom, comments? Reaction?
Right, I agree. I mean, it's up to the town council.
May I make a comment? Also, I want to say, as Ron Thompson indicated, the council just passed, I believe it has taken effect, the 3 per 100 requirement now. This at 30% is for all developments. It falls in between, it sets just a base minimum that a developer would have to present in the plan. It follows existing code with a base percentage that should meet residential development. And as the town attorney indicated, this chart would only come into play if or once the town is deemed adequate for open space. Until that time, any development that has a residential component will have to be meeting the 3 acres per 100 residents, which is normally, if I go by what the town engineer and the town attorney has indicated, is a much more, provides a much more amount of open space than what this 30% would. So any development, so it would be a little bit hard to say that the 30% is restrictive and hurting them, any development that is currently being considered, in my view.
Mr. Chair.
Reactions, yes?
When, I know we had some people look at this. I know we got some from Pleasance. They did their research. I know we did our research. Did anybody come up with more than 25, 20, I mean, I know there's 25, 20, 15% open space requirements. Did we really come up with more than that anywhere else?
I thought we did.
Yes, I could address that. One good example, so we looked at 11 jurisdictions other than Mount Airy, so a total of 12, including what's currently written for Mount Airy. To get to your question, the one that comes straight to mind, I believe, is Brunswick City. Brunswick City has an open space code requirement that is based upon the number of dwelling units per acre within that mixed-use district for the Brunswick City. At 7 dwelling units per acre, which is what we're proposing in this amendment, that coincides with the City of Brunswick's required open space of 35%. So to the question, there's one example I just know right off the top of my head. Perhaps in just a very honest statement that indeed it's difficult to look at the survey and kind of do an apples to apples. Yeah. Because I think it's previously been stated tonight, every jurisdiction looks at this a bit different, has definitions a bit different, and slices and dices the residential portion of their mixed use a bit different. So it is advisory. It helped me get to where I thought 30 was a reasonable number, Brunswick being a good example of what I just said. that sort of thing. The other thing I would add, Commissioner O'Malley, is that if we look at just the residential portion, 75%, and we look at the suggested 7 dwelling units per acre, we're in the arena of the other district called R7, just for that 75%. And so if we apply what's currently required for R7 residential, currently in our code, and we apply that to the residential portion of MXD, you actually have a calculation that brings you at 37% open space requirement. So again, 37 looking strictly at consistent code for residential portion of MXD. An example such as Brunswick, and then where we are currently at 10%. So again, 30% I think is a fair, reasonable outcome.
And that's fair. I love open space. I think we're lacking and we need much more of it. My concern is if best practice in most of these communities are 25% or 20%, that's just the minimum that we're asking. That doesn't mean they can't provide more. My concern is, and the theory behind mixed use is, you want good quality open spaces. If we're losing, 10% grass because we're getting all these new buildings or amphitheater or playgrounds or this and that, that's worth more in the long run. And in reality, mixed use is not supposed to have giant open spaces in between it. It's a walkable community. It's supposed to be close. So if we're setting the minimums, we can always go up. I think part of the problem is if we become an outlier and we go too high, we're going to create more problems than what we need.
Commissioner again said 30% is a reasonable number, because you also have to take into consideration, say a percent, one's using 10%, 20%. You would have to say, is that a heavy urban municipality in my view? What are they using MXD for? If they're using it for a site redevelopment of an old industrial site that is in the middle of town, they're not going to have a large amount of percentage that can be converted. They want a small amount. Here within the town boundaries, as for the town, if you look at it, anything that could be converted or zone MXD is not an industrial redevelopment site. They could potentially have the land to do open space. Also, as to your comment, this is not, in my view, hindering the design of a plan in any such way. It does not set any restrictions on the design of a development. That leaves up to them, as long as whatever would be deemed open space within the development meets the 30%, then they have it as a minimum. As you said, they can always go up, but a minimum of 30, I believe, is good for the area, good for the town, matches the surrounding areas, because we don't want to be known as a urban center and going towards a rural area, in my view. So I believe the 30% is a pretty good, reasonable number to move forward, to have set as a minimum for anything once we're deemed adequate. This chart, the 30% does not come into play until we're deemed adequate. So, in reality, oh, sorry, Tom, sorry. 9 times out of 10, it should not, right? Or am I speaking?
I'm trying to say they're two separate things.
Okay.
One is you've got a development that provides the open space that the ordinance says they should in Chapter 98. The other talks about, okay, even if that's so, do they get to go forward now, or are the brakes put on for now while the town is inadequate? And what 25 says is the brakes don't necessarily get put on if they meet a certain threshold, and if the Planning Commission in its review decides to grant a waiver. Okay. There was a point earlier that, I'm the lawyer, not the mathematician. Somebody should check whether or not 30% net developable is more than 3 to 100. I haven't done that.
Okay.
Because the intent, I think,
Yeah.
of the chapter 25 is when you're inadequate, you require a little more to get it, to allow it to move forward. That is the intent.
And when you say chapter 25, that's the 3 per 100?
Yes.
The 3, when I say 3 per 3 acres per 100.
So, the one comment that was made is if you're going to put 30% on net developable that's higher than that, I guess you could.
Okay.
But that doesn't seem to me to be the legal intent.
Let's see, the math calculation, I'll just say what I've done on the math, 30% is reasonable for all the left, for the 3 parcels that are large enough to have an MXD zoning on it, and it falls in between, it falls beneath the 3 per 100 requirement, in my view. And if I did the math right. But then again, the 3 per 100 depends on what their population's proposing too.
Ron, comment?
I apologize. Everybody talks about that we're trying to do an ordinance for the future for anything that happens. However, this is really about the Beck project. There is nothing in the master plan that you're showing for MXD property or allowing for zoning of MXD. So, and there's nothing that the town is undertaking now or probably in the future that will bring them into compliance with the open space ordinance of 3 acres per 100. So we are always going to have to, as we move forward with the Mount Airy Crossing or Beck property, to provide that 3 acres per 100, the higher standard. Please do not try to sell this that, oh, we have to do this for something down the road, when you don't even have it in the master plan for something down the road to do. This is about Beck. We're down to public hearings. This should just be put aside, and let's move forward in the process.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so even if there's nothing right now, there could be something later down the road. And we, as a planning commission, need to look out for the future of Mount Airy, and that's our responsibility.
Well, we're writing the 2033 plan
Yeah, we're doing it now.
right now,
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and we're just at the beginning of that process.
correct.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to note that there was a time when this property wasn't zoned MXD either, right? So there could be other properties that request a rezoning at some point, especially when they're being annexed in, so.
That's different. Properties within the town, there are no properties within the town that are of a size to allow this ordinance to apply. The only thing would be potentially the carnival grounds, if you wanted to allow them to rezone, and they've all said, we're not going to develop. That's our legacy here. So, and an annexation, quite frankly, is much of an uphill that we're trying to climb with the development of the Beck property, Mount Airy Crossing. An annexation is going to end up going through a whole public referendum, just like the last one did. So, again, there's nothing in your new plan that's going to be MXD. Harrison Leisure, that's OPE, unless you've all decided you're going to change it to MXD. Right now, it's OPE. That's no residential.
I,
think there's nothing yet.
yeah,
There's always a
There's always can
possibility.
be.
yeah.
There's nothing yet.
The operative word is yes.
There's nothing yet. It might be in the plan, but for any potential annexations, Mr. Thompson probably knows this too, it will be a discussion of what comes in. And if something comes in or wants to change to a higher density or a different use that the county could potentially own, we would either have to change it or just say, hey, here it is, we're ready to go, we've got the 30%. So this is all about current zoning. He's trying to confuse the topic of, in my view, of it applies to a current project that's still under planning, nothing's finally approved. This is all about the zoning to make sure we have a minimum criteria that is doable for the town currently and in the future.
If you have something being, and I disagree with that, I'm trying to confuse it. I think Carl is, if you have something that is going to be annexed and they're going to propose MXD, you have the opportunity at that point in time to look at your ordinance and make those changes for something in the future. Making it for changes for something that is ongoing and existing is inappropriate.
Introduce yourself and then let's hear it.
Good evening. I'm David Bowersox, 24 North Court Street. I'm here on behalf of the Beck family. I'd like to pick up where Mr. Thompson just ended. The eventuality of a potential annexation. One of the other things, because the council and planning commission are so deeply involved and institutionally you're so ingrained in that annexation process, you have an opportunity to get an annexation agreement from the property owner or the applicant at that time. And that can address any number of different types of utilities, facilities, and services. So that is another crucial difference between the what if in the future and what's staring us down now. Now meaning Wednesday night, Saturday. There's another thing I want to call to your attention, and that's the existing language of 9823. I've also read Mr. McCarron's letter that was referred to previously. At pages 3 through 5, there is some discussion about what do these open space ordinances, and I'm using that as a broad term, what are they trying to do? Because the APFO 25.5 doesn't have a definition of open space. There is no other definition of open space that I have found in your ordinances except 9823. Now, there is some discussion about, in Tom's letter, about is it appropriate to read similar ordinances together to try to discern a meaning. And Tom, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Tom concluded, yes, there is some validity to looking for guidance in two ordinances when the language of one does address the topic in a definition perhaps more specifically. But what I'm getting at is this ordinance is here purportedly to amend 9823. If you read the language of 9823, and in the year since Clark Wagner has been here dealing with amendments to the MXD ordinance, no one's tried to change this language, and that the purpose of the open space requirement is to soften the impact to the town from residential development. Residential development. So I'm suggesting, for the sake of consistency and to try to remain consistent with what your ordinance has said from the start, that you consider what the purpose is of that ordinance while you're trying to amend it, and that you address the impact from residential only. There's been discussion about other jurisdictions. What is their number? Well, the number is kind of a moving target, isn't it? With different jurisdictions that you look at. But in Mount Airy, you're coupling this number with a very, very stringent definition of open space, or I could say a broad definition of what is disqualified from being considered open space. It is different different and much more restrictive, what you're excluding from the other ordinances that were surveyed. So I commend you for the sensitive treatment you're giving this tonight and the way you're trying to find a reasonable way through. You're talking about a 30% number. There's been other suggestions. I would ask if you think 30's the number, 30's the number, but you limit it to the acreage of the residential component of the projects that are before you. Whether they're purely residential, whether they're downtown zone residential component or not, whether they're the MXD residential component or the MXUCC residential component. Because your ordinance already tells you the purpose for taking the open space is to address the impact of residential development. Thank you.
Your turn.
Okay. I'm good, thank you. Cecily Bedwell, Design Collective, 100 East Pratt Street, Baltimore, Maryland. I'm going to go a little off topic, but I don't want this other clause that's being suggested to be changed to be left off the table tonight, because I think we have addressed it in the past. Yes. Because the number of townhouses, attached townhouses, is in this ordinance change being suggested to be lowered than no more than 5 dwelling units per building, or in one townhouse group as it's stated, but same thing, in one building, no more than 5. Previously, it was 8. I will say that from a planning standpoint, I think we agree that it should be 7, but not 8. We never propose that in BAC. I've never done that in any other plan. But 7 is a reasonable number because the intent of that is to have townhouses at the end of a block that help to block views down the alley. If we have to divide those up, you're getting views down the alley to the backs of units, and we don't want that. The streetscape, the public realm is paramount in an MXD ordinance. We showed images previously of projects that I worked on where there are 7 in a row, and we talked about we don't just keep those all at the same frontage or all of the elevations align. We will have it in the pattern book that they have to step in reasonable ways so that you don't have a wall of buildings. But I think it's really critical to think of it from the larger planning standpoint, that the intent is not to create these long buildings, it's really to do other things, to block views down the alley. I ran numbers, in terms of the block sizes that we have, and 7 units at the end of a block is the number that is needed to block views down the alley. So we're not arbitrarily coming up with that 7 dwelling units in one building. And I would urge you to not limit it to 5, but consider that one clause. It's under item H, number 2, to revise that in the suggested to no more than 7 dwelling units per building.
Question, real quick.
What do you mean by alleys? Can you, because I'm having a hard time visualizing what you're saying with 5 and 7 like 7 blocking alleys?
Sure. So in an MXD, we often want to have units that are rear loaded. So they're rear loaded off a lane or an alley that is in the middle of the block. So a typical block width would be the lot depth, an alley, and a lot depth. We have areas that are rear loaded townhouses that are 70-foot deep lots. The alley is 24, and then you have at the other side of the block another 70 feet. All added up, as you turn the corner around that block to the end of the block, that's what I'm talking about in terms of having units that line the end of that block so you're not seeing to the backs of units. Again, MXD is all about the public realm, the streetscape. We want to take the parking that maybe in conventional suburban development shows up in the front of units, lines the street, cuts up the sidewalks, creates driveways. We want to put those to the rear, and that's how we've planned it, and that was the intent of the MXD. It says that, in the MXD ordinance is to create that walkable pedestrian realm. And so the alleys help to take the traffic, if you will, the parking feature of the lots and puts that to the rear instead of in the front of the units. Does that help? Okay.
Okay, all right.
Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay. Planning Commission, how you wish to proceed?
I believe where we are, we have a motion. There was discussion of an amendment that was then later withdrawn. The motion still stands without any further amendments. Nor do I offer changes to the motion.
Would you repeat the
Certainly.
original motion then?
The motion is for this commission to provide a conditional approval recommendation to the council regarding 2023-32. The condition is a change to paragraph 98-23, paragraph I, table 1, to now read MXU-CC is at 30%, and below it, MXD is at 30%. Both of these are changes from the proposed 40%. No other changes are in the conditional approval.
I will second that motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. I see his hand. Let me call. Okay? Before we have any more discussion on that, let's see what this gentleman has to say.
I'm Ron Beck, one of the property owners. At the last town council meeting, Mr. Munder agreed just below the table, in addition to what Vice Chairman again is proposing, Mr. Munder agreed to not change applicant to property owner. I'd made a concern about being the property owner, and
It's still going to change, it's just not in this version. It'll probably do a table.
so I was hoping it wasn't forgotten.
It was not forgotten. I've got a note on my thing to make sure that Tom, or when it comes to the council for final discussion, that change will be added
Okay, thank
to
you.
it.
You have that assurance, sir?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, so we don't need to amend.
No.
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 We're good then.
Yeah, so to the gentleman that raised that issue, I believe that when it goes back to council, it'll reflect what you brought up.
Just to be sure, let's repeat it again. Repeat it again. Just so we all know, okay? Let's repeat it again. So it's clear.
So I make a motion for this commission to provide a conditional approval recommendation regarding 2023-32 with the change on paragraph 98-23, paragraph I, table 1, to read instead MXU-CC is 30% and MXD is 30%.
And I still second that motion.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready for question? Ready for question? All those in favor of the motion as stated, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, like sign?
Nay.
All right. It passes. Okay. Now, let's see where we are. For section 6. Okay, I think as most of you are aware, we have 2 public hearings coming up this week. On Wednesday, September 27th, from 6 to 9:15 p.m. at the American Legion on Prospect Road, okay? We have the first public hearing on Mount Airy Crossing. And then just 3 days later, on Saturday, the September 30th, from 1 to 4:15 in the afternoon, same location, we have the second Okay. All right, John, did you want to make any comment about how those will be handled and the material that will be available?
Yeah, actually, there should be a short, they're actually inside of the packets. There's a tentative hearing schedule as well, the schedule, and also, this is sort of the guidelines to how we got where we are. But this is the tentative schedule for the 27th and the 30th. Again, there'll be a code of conduct, it'll be posted out front. People have to sign in, affirming that they are going to act civil and et cetera. Again, there'll be opportunity for the applicant to present a short overview, and then we'll go into public comment. It is not a answering question, it's just more of hearing all the public that comes out to, give their concerns. And again, it will be at least recorded, if not broadcast Facebook Live. I don't think CMC is going to be available, but I'll be running it through my camera out of the back. And
Okay.
that's about it.
All right.
So please come out.
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment, and if I may, just, John, thank you for setting this up with the American Legion. And if I could just really emphasize for the public here, at the front end of both sessions, so this would be from 6 to 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, and from 1 to 1:30 p.m. on Saturday, the 30th. I mention that specifically because if there is regarded an opportunity to have a Q&A with the developer, that is the time we have set aside on the front end. It's deemed open house for the very reason that we want people to come in, and I think it serves in the interest of the public to have absolute clarity, to be informed as well as they can be on the revised pre-concept plan. And secondly, on behalf of the developer is given the opportunity to provide that clarity and have that interaction. So that is the ideal time for the give and take in a civil manner between the public and the developer's plan. And just to reiterate, the developer will then go further into the agenda on both of those days to give a presentation to everyone in the American Legion. And to again reiterate, that is not set up for the Q&A. That is to, again, emphasize clarity, inform the public, making sure that everyone has a good understanding. And then finally, the key to it all is for us to listen up on the dais to the public's comments based upon them being well informed. It's really straightforward. So thank you again, John, for setting this up.
Trying to make it as efficient and effective as possible. Okay, very good. Councilman Evans.
Thank you, sir. It's a pretty easygoing meeting on September 11th for the town council. We gave out 2 proclamations to Patrol Officer Gebhardt and Senior Officer Medeiros for a narcotics seizure. Also a certificate of recognition to Ms. Leslie Dickinson for her dedication to the town after she resigned her position. Ordinance 2023-30 to change inadequacy waiver threshold for MXD was approved 4-1. Ordinance 2023-32, as you know, was granted the extension because we talked about it tonight. And ordinance 2023-40 to impose a 75,000 gallon per day yield requirement on water wells was introduced and seconded. That was it for that night. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
No. Any comments or questions for Jason? All right. Zoning Administrator report?
Yep, it's pretty self-explanatory. Not a lot of permits being issued for any type of new buildings, but a lot of fence permits and doing their basements. Also want to let everybody know, we did receive one RFP for the third-party consultant. We had one proposal. So if there is something moving forward that you want to submit to them, let me know, and I will, and it'd be at the pattern book for Green Tree. I'll submit the pattern book requesting for a proposal, and then that'll come back to us, and then we'll determine if we're going to move forward with that. But we only did receive one, and I have a couple of these if anybody wants to look at one.
Okay, yeah, absolutely,
Pass them around. You know, but
absolutely. Is 2 copies enough? Is there anybody, how many folks are interested in taking a
I
look?
only have 2.
How difficult is it to copy, do you think?
I mean, I guess we can probably, I can see if we can get copies made and maybe
Yeah.
scanned in and emailed to everybody.
That'd be
That'd be
great.
the
Yeah,
easiest.
that would be better.
Yeah, I didn't want to do anything until I let you know about it.
Okay, very good,
Thank you.
very good. Yeah, you can just email us.
Yep, I can do that.
All right. So we've got, I think as you're aware, master plan work session date is October the 5th, 7:30 PM. And our next planning commission date is at the end of the month, October 30th at 7:30. All right, anybody have anything else? If there's nothing else, I would declare this meeting adjourned. Very productive, very efficient. Much more so than a couple meetings ago. It's working, it's working.